It is August 7th, 2023, and no, Sunday was not a dream. Erik Karlsson is officially a Pittsburgh Penguin. To start off today's show, Pat and I are going to discuss what this means for the rest of the team right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. That is Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can follow Pat's Twitter at Synonym for Wet. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. So, Pat, something big happened on Sunday. I think everyone around this city is aware of that, as Erik Karlsson is now a member of the Penguins. And we discussed a whole bunch of topics in that 15 to 16-minute emergency episode, but we didn't get into just what it means overall for the team. You know, who's going to take Jan Rutta's spot? Jeff Petrie going to Montreal. I'll have more on the Montreal aspect of the trade a little later on in the show. But when you look at the trade right now, just what do you think it means moving forward when it comes to this team?
Well, as we all expected, they're still in go-for-it mode, as well they should be, when you have the likes of Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Jake Gensel, and so on. So it sends a signal that this whole don't mortgage the future, even though they didn't really, without still going for it or whatever convoluted plan there was under the Ron Hextall regime, is not the case. They are going for it, as well they should. And of all the people who were allegedly available, whether it be via trade or free agency, the Penguins reeled in one of the biggest fish available, no pun intended. I know he was on the Sharks.
And you're right about that. And it feels like there's such a weird gap between how Penguins fans and everyone surrounding the team feel about the trade versus rival fans. That's, I think, the biggest contrast of when it comes to this trade that I've seen on social media, other websites and this stuff, where everyone in this city is super excited for obvious reasons, but you have other rival fans and rival media members saying like, oh, this is just the retirement home and all this other nonsense. But the thing is, I don't think people in this city truly care about that. The fans here, they've seen the team win 3 Stanley Cups. If you can stay competitive through the end of the Crosby, Malkin, Letang window, make the playoffs, maybe make a little bit of noise. Obviously, winning another cup would be awesome, but they already have won 3. That would be awesome. But you don't want to just fade into irrelevancy pretty quickly. Like you want to maximize this as long as you can, so that you want to make the team fun to watch. At the end of the day, this is an entertainment business. You got to sell tickets. Erik Karlsson is going to do that. And if they don't go on another big run, that's fine. But heck, I just want to see the team fun to watch. I think that's where I'm at, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I just got done watching the season premiere of Winning Time on HBO, the story about the LA Lakers, and darned if the Penguins aren't basically the LA Lakers of the NHL. It's showtime. That's what they are. That's what they've always been since the 1980s when Mario Lemieux came in. And I get, you know, this is the retirement home. Oh, your core's old and all this stuff. It's valid, but it leaves out the other part of the story. Crosby had 93 points last year. Malkin had 83. Erik Karlsson had 100. We're not talking about guys who are on a swift decline. Now, let's say for the record, that's the nightmare scenario that could happen. You know, I don't want to rain on the parade of getting Erik Karlsson, but there's a chance that Time the Toolman Taylor catches up with everybody next year and these guys fall off. But all signs don't point to that. So that's the disaster scenario, and I just don't see that happening. Now, is it a slog in the Eastern Conference now with everybody loading up? Sure is. But, you know, this is Penguins hockey right here. This is fast, it's fun, and it plays offense.
And I've seen that take around here as well. Well, where do the Penguins stack up in the Metropolitan Division? That answer to me is simple. I think they're the 4th best team in the division right now, and they can make a push for that 3rd spot with the Rangers. I mean, I don't think they're as good as Carolina or New Jersey right now, but they can definitely make a push for that third spot, especially if the Rangers falter this upcoming season. I don't even really think the Rangers are that good, in my opinion. I think the Penguins are definitely better than the Islanders and the Capitals. Now, obviously, they're better than the Blue Jackets and the Flyers, but this isn't a team that is just fading to irrelevancy next year. Could it happen? I mean, small chance. I mean, that's why they have, the top 10 protection on the first round pick that they gave up, but it's not likely just because of how good Karlsson was this past season, how the core continues to play at a high level. Jake Guentzel, I think, is going to be really good when he comes back. More on that a little bit later on in today's show. I'm tired of these weird takes about how they're entering purgatory so quickly and why they should have just rebuilt after last year. Like that's not what you do when you have these players playing at a high level. It's different if you're saying maybe the Chicago Blackhawks where Kane and Taves went down a little bit, or maybe the Red Wings when, Datsuk left and Zetterberg was not the same anymore. But this Penguin situation, it is not those two situations. The two, it's honestly not even comparable, to be honest.
No, but also this is the Metropolitan Division since its inception in 2013, 2014. It's a division where you are going to battle for the top 4 spots no matter what. It's just the way in which this division has always operated. And yeah, I'd agree with you that they're the 4th best team on paper right now in the division, maybe tied for 3rd with the Rangers. The Devils and Hurricanes are the class of the division right now. But at the same time, realistically, how much separation is there? I don't think there's a lot. So every point this year is going to matter. Every game this year is going to matter, especially if it's going to make the difference between outright making the playoffs in a top 3 spot in the Metropolitan or getting into a wild card, and not to mention home ice, because again, we do have to talk about the fact that it's an older core right now. So we're going to want them to play more games at home than they play games on the road once we get late into the year. So with Jake Guentzel out and now out for at least the start of the year, and then Erik Karlsson coming in, that makes up some of that gap. So we'll see.
Yeah, and just switching gears a little bit to end the segment here, the Penguins got a pretty underrated piece in this deal as well, outside of the obvious and Erik Karlsson. Ren Pitlick from the Montreal Canadiens played 46 games for the Habs this past year, 6 goals, 15 points, has played 123 games throughout his career, has 21 goals, 54 points in those games. His career high actually came with the Canadiens during the 2021-2022 season when he had played 46 games, had 9 goals, 26 points during the year, then played another 20 games with the Minnesota Wild. He's kind of in the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to defensive impacts with what you want from someone in the bottom 6. The Penguins already have plenty of those players in the bottom 6 right now, but when you look at Pitt, like with his underlyings ranked only the 1st percentile for 5-on-5 even strength defense, you are not getting him for that, or honestly, even strength offense, but he does have a little bit of finishing ability, ranked in the 71st percentile this past season for finishing at 5-on-5. So he brings a needed element to the bottom 6 with that. But also, Pat, he's got to go out there and win a job, because the Penguins heading into camp, a lot of forwards they're battling for only kind of a few spots.
Yeah, and this feels like a guy who, I'd have to go pull up cap friendly here real quick just to see what his deal is. It doesn't look like he's waivers exempt. It doesn't look like he's a guy who you're going to be able to pull up and down from the minors. But I mean, you look at his numbers, and for a guy making just a shade over $1 million and could be a bottom 6 player that produces a little bit, I don't think this is a bad guy to have on your roster. Now, like you said, got to make the team. A lot of spots open right now. They have 12 forwards in total, not counting Jake Guentzel being hurt and anybody else that might be battling for a spot coming up from Wilkes this year. So again, I said this last year going into camp with the defense. It looks kind of like, we're going to have some battles in camp for the bottom of the roster, and that's only a good thing, because it's going to make these guys have to play their best in camp to get a spot on a team that's still pushing for a championship.
And we can say that defensively as well before we head to break here. Jan Rutta, part of the trade to the San Jose Sharks with Mikhail Granlund. So he is out after just 1 year, after the 3-year deal that Ron Hextall signed him to last year. And that opens up a spot now for that number 6 defensive spot. And if you're asking me, I think it's Chad Ruhwedel's, and I know people are going to push back on that because of the season he just had. I get it. His underlyings were not good. He took a lot of penalties towards the late stages of the season that cost the Penguins points. Wasn't good offensively, but he's also never that good offensively. But right now, with how cheap he is and how I honestly expect him to have a bounce back this upcoming season, because he's been pretty serviceable throughout his career as being one of the better number 7 defensemen in the NHL. Heck, after Cody Ceci left to go to the Oilers, he had a pretty good year before they signed Jan Rutta to play this past season. I know Ruhwedel played a little bit, but didn't play as much as he did the year before. But if you're asking me, I think it's Ruhwedel's job to lose. Now, could Friedman play there as well? Yes, but he usually plays on his offside. That's just how Mike Sullivan's been using him. When you look at the defense, who is the favorite to get that number 6 job?
I mean, I'm with you. I think it's Chad Ruhwedel. I think coaching staff likes him. Management likes him. He's a very serviceable number 7 D-man. And I say this all the time. I said it on Dying Alive all the time when it comes to defensemen like Chad Ruhwedel. When you don't notice him is when he does his best work. When you don't talk about him, when you don't see him out there, when he's just ho-hum, eating up the minutes he eats, and being positionally sound and good defensively, that's when a guy like him's at his best. He's never going to be a big-time point producer. He's not going to be a guy who lays the body all the time. He's just a guy who is going to keep the puck out of your net and out of your own zone as best he can.
And that's really all they need, because you'll have P.O. Joseph next to him, who is a bit better offensively. He's also has more room to grow, especially considering how young he is. And I think he is going to take another step forward this upcoming season. I really wouldn't mind a POJ Ruhwedel pairing that much, just because also how much are they really going to play? 12 minutes a night, 13 minutes, if that, maybe even less than that, to be honest, because you're going to have Letang and Karlsson out on their separate pairings for 20 plus minutes a night. So the third pairing, while yes, it's maybe a little bit of a concern, I really don't think it's that big, considering that Ruhwedel has been with the Penguins for a long time, and with P.O. Joseph having a pretty good year last year before he kind of fell off a little bit this past year. I think that has the makings of a pretty decent third pairing, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's a great trickle-down effect for the defense getting Erik Karlsson, because I think part of the reason POJ burned out was he played a little more than he probably should have. Now when you have Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang on your roster, they're going to eat up a huge chunk of minutes, which is going to help P.O. Joseph grow. It's going to be very similar to me in the way they used Justin Schultz before he went off and got paid. They put him in advantageous situations. They started him in the offensive zone a lot more. They sheltered his minutes. They didn't play him too much. And he continued to improve and continued to improve. I think the same is going to happen with POJ. He's going to play less. He's going to have a very defensively accountable partner with him. He's got a great mentor in Chris Letang, and it's just going to help him grow as a player. So it also doesn't get into the factor. We also haven't gotten into the factor, and we don't have to all the way, but there's also the prospect of Ty Smith. He's still pretty good. And
yeah,
you got to figure at some point now he wants to make a move and become a regular NHL defenseman.
And also in a pinch, say someone in the top 4 gets hurt, whether it's Graves or Pettersson, hopefully not, you can still have POJ come up there for a few games and play, 17, 18 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, at least just for a few games, not for like 10 to 15 games in a row, but maybe just a few games or something like that. That's totally fine with me, just because the Penguins injury curse knows no bounds. But that'll do it for this segment. Coming up in the second segment, what could be next for Kyle Dubas and the Penguins, especially after what Elliotte Friedman said on Sportsnet Central last night? That's coming up after this break. But before we discuss that, our next partner is AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. I drink it literally every day, right when I wake up in the morning. Usually it's around 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. I started drinking it because I wanted better gut health. It also just makes me ready to take on my day a little bit better, especially on a Monday. I always have a case of the Mondays, people. When I drink this, it is so freaking good. All great athletes have one thing in common. They take care of their bodies, and a huge part of that starts with optimizing whole body health. A lot of them also drink AG1, and it's why I am a huge fan. With every daily serving, I'm setting myself up for success with 75 high-quality ingredients that give me key daily nutrients and support energy, focus, strength, and clarity. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host Patrick Damp. So, Pat, Kyle Dubas spoke, well, little over an hour ago at this point. And when he was asked about what could be next for the Penguins, kind of downplayed it, but that's just honestly typical GM speak because you're really not going to reveal your plans to the public, just like he didn't on July 1 when he talked up Jeff Petrie. Where is Jeff Petrie now? In Montreal, and he might get flipped at some point. That is an aspect of the deal that I really did not think about on Sunday when we did our emergency episode. I think Montreal had a sneaky good day for the deal because if they can flip Petrie, even though the Penguins are retaining 25% of that cap hit and they can retain half of that, a team gets Petrie for 2.34 million, something like that for 2 years, a contending team will pounce all over that. So I think that's a little decent bit of business there from Kent Hughes. Also, you get Casey DeSmith to have competition with Caden Primo, so that'll be interesting there as well. So not a bad day, I don't think, for Montreal, and they also got rid of Pitlick and Mike Hoffman, who they've been wanting to get out of that deal for a while. But as for the Penguins, getting back to the overall point for this segment, there was a report late on Sunday night when Erik Friedman was on Sportsnet Central, and he brought up Tomas Tatar and how he wouldn't be surprised if the Penguins were to sign him. Now, they are over the cap, so you would have to make that work. Kyle Dubas said earlier today that Jake Gensel is not going to go to LTIR. They project him to miss only the first 5 games. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's the first 2 weeks of the season. It's really not that bad, which is honestly really good news. We were discussing this last week, and maybe we thought it was going to be late November or into November, but it sounds like it's not going to be that. When you look at a player like Tatar, he makes all the sense in the world for the Penguins, especially someone that can play up and down the lineup. And when the team is healthy, you stick him down in the bottom 6. He is that offensive presence that unit badly needs.
Oh yeah. I mean, if that's who they're targeting and who they go get, absolutely do it right now and then figure out the cap after you get them. Just because I'm stunned at this point, into August 7th, that this guy's still on the market. That seemed like a guy that was going to get scooped up pretty quickly. And again, I understand there's not a lot of cap space and flexibility in the league right now, but a guy like that for your bottom 6, I don't want to sit here and talk him up like he's Erik Karlsson or a superstar, but you want to do some winning. That's a good guy to get on your roster for just depth. And, again, I'm stunned he's still out there. So I'm really hoping that's who they are targeting, because sign me up for that right now.
20 goals, 48 points in 82 games this past season. You stick him down on a third-line role with whoever you want there, man, that would be a lot of fun. And heck, if you can get him for cheap too, maybe, I don't know, $1 million or $2 million, because I don't know how cheap you can get him, to be honest. I mean, if you can do that, obviously that would be awesome. But, man, he would be such a great add to this team, ranked in the 83rd percentile for 5-on-5 offense this past year, 93rd percentile for 5-on-5 defense, 86th percentile for transition. It is mind-boggling to me that he is still on the open market, as you said too. He would fix a lot of the depth scoring issues that people have with this team heading into the season. You sign him to a 1-year deal. Man, sign me up for that every day.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, you probably can get him for cheap simply because time's running out and he's going to want to be on a team. He's going to want to know what his 23, 24 year is going to look like. And with nobody signing him yet, the number goes down, because on July 1 is when people overpay. It's July 8th when people start getting deals. And it's August 7th. He's still out there. So I think, we just talked about the logjam on both the offense and defense. So that means Dubas has some room to move some guys out. He's got some extra pieces he could probably get rid of for pennies on the dollar if he wants to, just so he can go fit in a guy like Tomas Tatar.
Yeah, and I think everyone's probably wishing for Jeff Carter to get that Marion Hossa equipment allergy right now so they could get that cap space and all that stuff. But that's honestly, that's probably not going to happen. They're going to be stuck with him for at least another year. But I mean, one of the other things that Dubas said during his press conference today is that he's not going to be afraid to use the waiver wire when it comes to competition with how close they are to the salary cap. And if you do sign Tatar and you are over the cap, and they will be at that point, especially if they don't want Gensel on LTIR, you are going to have to waive a few players to get cap compliant, whether that's a Andreas Janssen, whether that's a Vinny Hinostroza, whether that's a even someone they signed on July 1, I don't know, Matt Nieto. I don't think they're going to have to waive him, but just players who are on cheap deals that may not make the team. And it would create for, more awesome training camp battles. And, if you can sign a guy like Tatar, bring him in, use him in a third line role. Heck, he can play in the top 6 to start the season too. That's the thing. You can play in those first 5 to 6 games with Sidney Crosby, with Evgeny Malkin, and he can produce well. And then when Jake comes back, you can slide him down and he can feast on easier lines. Man, that'd be awesome too.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And it harkens back to the 2016, 2017 Cup winning teams. Those teams came at you in waves. Now, the third and fourth lines, we can kind of count HBK as a third line. Like, the fourth line didn't shoot the lights out. They weren't big time scorers. They were timely scorers, and they were contributors when they needed to be. So this is what you can see Kyle Dubas is doing with this roster once again, is that they are trying to take the burden off of Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Gensel, Rust. They want more people. He wants more people on the roster to be able to contribute, which, as we've talked about on this show, I've written about it. It's been done to death. That was their problem last year. Nobody outside of the top 6 and top pairing defensemen produced anything worth what they were getting paid, or to make that team an actual playoff contender, not even to talk about being a Stanley Cup contender. So that's why you got to go after a guy like Tatar, and some of the guys on cheaper deals that aren't waivers exempt. If you lose them, okay, no big deal.
Now here's a question I have for you. He's still available. Would be interesting. Do you sign Patrick Kane to a Flyer when he gets back healthy from that hip surgery?
No. Listen,
I'm kind of in the same boat. I think he's more cooked at this point. I understand he was really, really good in 2021, 2022. But this past season, even after he came back, and again, I know he had a hip injury, he just didn't look like the same player. And with the age that he's at right now and coming off that major surgery, I just don't think he's going to get back to being the player that he once was. He can still be, decently serviceable, but I don't know. I'm just not big on him coming in, even on a cheap deal.
It's a hip injury, and at his age, with the miles he's had on his body as an NHL player, especially a top tier one, that's really hard to come back from. And if you can get him on something cheap, I still don't think the Penguins are the fit. I do think he's going to be somewhere next year. It's just not going to be here. And listen, he has some of the best hands we've ever seen on an NHL player. His highlight tape is basically and one hockey, but his numbers, his decline, and now a major hip surgery, it's not over for him, but it's not going to get the reset in Pittsburgh.
Right. I would agree with that. And again, he's going to be out to start the season anyway. I just don't think they're really going to do that, I think, at this point. Is there any other player out there that you think Kyle Dubas could go after before the season, whether it's on a PTO, cheap 1-year deal, anything like that?
I mean, I do think Tatar is the main target, somebody you want to look at to bring in. There's a couple other names I saw, like, Pia Suter's still out there. That could be a nice guy to take a flyer on.
Yep.
One guy that I'm surprised is still out there, and I don't know if you would want to go for him. It's just a name that stands out. He didn't get qualified. He's looking for a home, and that's Jesse Puljujarvi. Maybe that's somebody you could look into because he's still out there without a home, and maybe that's an okay little reclamation project if you can bring him in for a year or two. But outside of that, I mean, Tatar should be the main target, and I think right now they're pretty much set. This is This is you need one more piece to bring in the depth to help your depth at forward. But I think right now this is a much better team on paper than it was at the end of the season last year.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, with the players that Dubas has sent out versus brought in, this is a playoff team heading into the season, in my opinion. They are better than the Islanders. The Islanders really haven't done anything this offseason. They are better than the Washington Capitals. They are at least a top 4 team in the Metro. They just have to go out there and prove it. So again, hopeful on Tatar. We'll have to see on that. They're capped out right now, but hey, anything's possible. Smart GMs can always figure out the salary cap. That's just how it is in the NHL. But that wraps up the second segment. Coming up to end the show, it's another special birthday today, Pat. Another superstar has turned 36, Sidney Crosby, his special day. We're going to discuss that right after this. All right, we're back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter, @Penguins. And of course, follow Patrick Damp on Twitter at synonym for wet. Also, of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen / watch of the day. So 8-7 day, always an important day in the city of Pittsburgh. Happy 36th birthday to Sidney Crosby. Got his pre-birthday gift on Sunday. Obviously, will go down as a top 5 player to ever play the game. He will have his jersey retired right after his career. He will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. 3-time Stanley Cup champion. He's been a point per game player throughout his career. Is hopefully going to get into the NHL's top 10 all-time scoring leaders this upcoming season. That's going to be awesome. But, it's not even just all of those amazing moments that just make me think of Sid. The one that still always gets at me is his comeback game against the Islanders. I was only a teenager at the time, and I had hockey practice about 30 minutes into that game. So I got to see the early parts of it. And again, I was only, at that time, 13, 14 years old. And for everyone wondering, yes, I stunk at hockey. That's why I'm talking about it today. And that's why I'm not playing in any professional league, not like I would. But
it really shows the age discrepancy that we have as hosts here, because you were a teenager getting ready for hockey practice for that game. I was in Atlantic City for my college hockey teammate's 21st birthday.
Oh my God. That's too good. I mean, I wasn't 21 until 2018. I think 2018 was when I turned 21, but God, I'm just like, I'm such a young buck. I'm sorry, people. But I remember sitting down with my mom to watch the game. PPG is just, Consol Energy Center at the time, but PPG now. You could sense it. Everyone was ready to bring that building down. And when he scored that goal against the Islanders and he roofed that backhander, I probably woke up everyone down the street in my neighborhood with the scream that I let out. My mom was going crazy. That goal, just seeing him come back, seeing him kick so much butt off that concussion when, heck, you didn't even know if he was going to play again. That's the main thing. It was just a storybook goal, I think. And that is, again, outside of the Stanley Cups, outside of everything else, that is what I'm going to remember the most about the Sidney Crosby era, was just him coming back with such a vengeance, scoring that goal, having an amazing game overall, and then kicking so much butt after that.
Yeah, the guy has a flair for the dramatic. He's great at it. And to the same point, one of the things I'm always going to remember is the 2010 golden goal for Canada against the United States. And I'm going to remember it just because, one, I'm pretty sure that his call for the puck to Ginla, yelling Iggy that loud, is still echoing through the mountains of Vancouver. It was that loud. But I also remember that day because, again, that was my freshman year of college and my first season playing for IUP hockey. And we were watching it at a teammate's apartment. Yeah. And the teammate in question is Canadian. So he was the lone Canadian on the roster, and he's sitting there with a bunch of Americans who are freaking out because we tied it late to force overtime in the gold medal game. And when Crosby scored, you could hear a pin drop. Like, it was dead silence except for this guy screaming and yelling. And I've never felt more conflicted in my life because I wanted the U.S. to win that gold. But man, of all the people to beat the United States, it just had to be Sid.
I was watching that game with my stepdad. And at that time, the Winter Olympics, I believe I was only 12 at the time there. I was going into middle school. And when I heard him say Iggy and then I saw him score, I just didn't say anything. I just stood at the screen and I was just like, no way. Like, the guy who I've grown up loving just because he plays for my favorite hockey team, doing that now to my home country, I was just like, you have got to be kidding me with that. And, obviously amazing moment for Team Canada, brutal for the United States men's team, but still one of the legendary moments of his career. The overtime winner against the Lightning, 2016 Game 2, with only less than a minute into that OT. A beautiful 3-on-2 rush. He just fires it past Andrei Vasilevsky. A really nice one-timer there. And I thought that was a game where we were going to play all night. It had the makings of one. And then it's funny. I heard my mom yell like a millisecond before I did because the TV up in her room was a little faster than the one in my basement. And I heard her yell. I was like, wait, what the heck? And then as soon as I thought that, I saw the goal, then I went crazy. But that's another one that I'll always remember. And just the runs that he went on. He was amazing in 2009. Not as much in this series against Detroit, but still really good. 2016 overall, amazing. 2017, great as well. But when you talk about someone who has lived up to the hype and then some throughout almost 20 years of playing in the NHL, it doesn't get much better than this, to be honest.
Yeah. And, as someone who is a native Pittsburgher, grew up here, I'm living here again after a few years away. Just no better human being as an ambassador for the sport, for the team, for the city, because you can always tell when somebody's kind of phony, right? When somebody's a little too perfect, they do a little too well. It kind of feels like it's an act. It kind of feels like he's putting on a front. By all accounts, what you see is what you get with Sidney Crosby. He's just a genuinely good person. He treats people the right way. He's never let fame and fortune get to his head. He signs autographs for everybody and any kid that sees him. He takes time after games to talk to disadvantaged or sick kids. And it's just, all in all, one of the best hockey players of all time, but just a quality human being by all accounts. So being able to, even though he's only about 3 years older than I am, being able to look up to a guy like that, to set that kind of example for the Penguins, for the hockey community and the sport in general, it's just such a blessing.
I love that you brought that up because he genuinely enjoys doing all of that off the ice too, just because that's how great of a human that he is. I mean, heck, there was a story of him playing a pickup game in Canada during the winter, just on a frozen pond with random kids. He was just driving by and he's like, oh, I'm just going to come out here for a skate. And that's just stuff like that. And everything you mentioned, that just shows what a quality person he is. And
the biggest thing for that is the Little Penguins program, because he always shows up for it. It would be very easy for him to call Dick's Sporting Goods and say, here's $3 million, outfit a bunch of Pittsburgh kids who can't afford hockey to go play hockey, and I'm just going to stay out of the way. But he shows up to practices. He has events about it. He signs autographs. He walks the walk and talks the talk. So again, genuinely great person, incredible hockey player. We couldn't be luckier to have this guy in our town.
And I'm glad that just going off that, I'm glad that the stupid whining, diving crap is hopefully gone now. Screw you, Ken Hitchcock, by the way, for starting that. It's your fault.
You said it before I did. That's all because the head coach of the Flyers, his rookie year early on, said something about Crosby being a whiner.
Yes.
And because Ken Hitchcock is an old hockey man, everybody picked it up and ran with it.
You're right. And, did he do it at times at the early stages of his career? Sure. But like every captain complains to the refs or talks to the refs. It's just that Ken Hitchcock started that whole campaign and everyone ran with it. And then that's why you saw stuff during the 2012 series against the Flyers, even before that, when it would make signs of just a pacifier and all this garbage. But he's 36 now. If you're still doing that, I think it's time to, you can go back to using your flip phone or something like that.
Yeah.
But
enough out of you.
It's hilarious that he still gets booed at the Wells Fargo Center. I hope he gets booed there for.
You would think they would learn.
They won't.
You would think they would learn.
They don't understand. The fine folks of Philadelphia do not understand it, Pat. Just let them lie. Let them lie. They don't get it. And when he continues to torch them this season, they still won't get it. That's just how it is. But happy 36th, Sid. Here's to many, many more. I just can't believe he's 36. I remember when he was 21 years old back in 2008, 2009. Honestly, still just starting out his career. Now he's almost 40. Where has the time gone with him? That's my question.
It's obscene.
I don't get it. And, I can't wait to see, how he ends his career. I mean, obviously he'll be a top 5 player of all time, but just in terms of records, points, goals, everything else, I can't wait to see what he does to end his career. But again, happy birthday, Sid. Hope you enjoyed your pre-birthday present on Sunday. Hope you enjoy your birthday today on Monday. But that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Really hope you enjoyed listening to / watching this episode with Pat and I. We'll be back with another episode for you all on Wednesday when I'm sure we'll discuss another part of the Erik Karlsson trade and a couple other things relating to the Penguins. So again, thank you all so much for listening / watching. Hope you all have a great rest of your Monday and Tuesday, and we'll be back with another episode on Wednesday.